Hi, I'm Damien Humphreys,
I'm Luke Hindmarsh
and we are,
in Deep Crit.
as usual, yes we are. And on today's video, this is part one of our look at the Barbarian class for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, part one of three. So in this video, we'll be looking at the basic Barbarian that is presented in the player's handbook and all the abilities that all Barbarians get. And then we will also be looking at the optional features presented in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything to add to those, and the two primal paths presented in the player's handbook, which are the path of the Beserker and the path of the Totem Warrior. If you want to rule the battlefield, if you want to have a head like a lump of iron and charge through your enemies, rending limb from limb and destroying everything in your path, then you might want to play a Barbarian. And if you do, here's the guide for you. So the first thing you'll want to do is put your highest ability scores into Strength followed by Constitution. These are very much the linchpin of all the Barbarian abilities going forwards. And you gain these following class features. So your hit dice is 1d12 per Barbarian level. The only class in the whole of Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition that gets a d12 as a hit dice, so they get more hit points than anybody else. Hit points at first level will be 12 plus your Constitution modifier, and then at each level after first will be a roll of a d12 or take the average of 7 plus your Con modifier for every level. The proficiencies that you're going to get straight out of the gate are light armor, medium armor and shields, simple weapons, martial weapons, no tool proficiencies. You will also have proficiency in saving throws for strength and constitution. Again, going back to that idea of the linchpin of the class. And then skills that you can choose at first level, you may choose two from the list of animal handling, athletics, intimidation, nature, perception and survival. And your starting equipment, if you choose class equipment as opposed to starting gold, your first choice is a choice between a great axe or any martial melee weapon, and then you'll get a choice between either two hand axes or any simple weapon, and then you'll also get an explorer's pack and 4 javelins to round off your basic Barbarian starters kit.
And that moves us into possibly the defining feature of the Barbarian, the primal ferocity of rage. On your turn, you enter rage as a bonus action, and it gives you some pretty cool abilities, like, for example, having advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws, which is useful not just in combat, but for whenever the rogue set off the trap and has been crushed under a pillar and someone needs to work themselves up to deadlift that pillar off them. But you also do extra damage, and you can have resistance to bludgeoning, piercing and slashing damage as a basic of the class. Some subclasses change that. The problem is, of course, you can't cast spells while raging or concentrate on them. And your rage lasts 1 minute, ending early if you're knocked unconscious, or if you haven't attacked a hostile creature or taken damage since then. Now, that leads to some possible exploits, rules as written, with taking damage, or what happens if you damage yourself. Personally, if I'm DMing, I say, no, if a hostile creature's damaged you. What about you, Damien? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I'd say rules as written, maybe an exploit, rules as intended, not much so. I wouldn't allow a Barbarian to necessarily damage themselves. Maybe they could be caught in the Wizard's Fireball and take some damage to keep their rage going. So maybe they'll be less concerned about being caught in the Fireball, especially, with certain class features for subclasses that could be taken later on. That might not be a problem. Of course, you can't wear heavy armor whilst going into rage either, and you get a limited number, which is listed in the rages column on the Barbarian table, and you must finish a long rest before you can rage again. This is, as you said, this is the heart and soul of the Barbarian class. What's not to like about it?
It's interesting because it always seems to come across as just being fury. I like to think of it as possibly more like a fugue state, so an altered state of mind, which could be hyperfocus. It doesn't have to be dribbling, drooling rage and uncontrolledness. But let's face it, that's probably what most people are going to want to play. That's probably what I often play if I were a barbarian, because it's fun.
Indeed, indeed. So your next ability that you get at first level, which synergizes very nicely with the rage, because not being able to wear heavy armor whilst raging, unarmored defense gives you the option to not wear any armor. And while you're not wearing any armor, your armor class would be equal to 10 plus your dexterity bonus plus your constitution modifier. And you can use a shield to gain this benefit, giving you a pretty decent armor class without having to wear any armor.
And in my mind, I've always seen the barbarian with a shield as hitting someone over the head with it, because it's a barbarian, that's what they do. That takes us on to reckless attack, because they've been doing it recklessly. At second level, you throw aside all concern for your own safety to hit extra hard, and that gives you advantage on your melee attacks, or melee attacks, using strength, not using dexterity, not using charisma. If you're somehow some kind of warlock multi-class, has to be a strength attack, but during that turn. So that sounds like it's great, but there is a downside, and that is that those who are attacking you also have advantage. And we've talked before about the fact that this can be actually used really tactically if, say, for example, you're fighting an invisible opponent, or you're in darkness fighting someone with devil's sight, that kind of thing. Then you're not really losing anything, and you're using your advantage to counteract the disadvantage that you've been given. So it's not just typically reckless. It can also be quite tactical, but then again, tactics and barbarians,
yeah, they don't always meet, but advantage and disadvantage are such a core and strong mechanic of the combat system within Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition that any way to generate advantage or negate disadvantage is always going to be super useful. So then the next ability that we come on to, at second level, you will gain danger sense. And this is giving you a sense of when things aren't quite right. It's that kind of always ready for action, always alert, kind of barbarian trope of being ready for danger at any moment. And mechanically this means that you get advantage on dexterity saving throw against an effect that you can see, such as a trap or a spell. And to gain this benefit, you can't be blinded, deafened, or incapacitated. As to how the new blind fighting style plays into that with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, I'm not sure. I would probably say that if it's within 10 feet and you have blind fighting from either a multi-class or a feat, then I'd say that you could still use that ability, I think.
Yeah, it may not be rules as written, but that's again a time when a DM has to use some discretion and say, yeah, that would make sense, I think.
Yeah.
And that then gives us, so at third level you get to choose your primal path, which we'll deal with later. Those are effectively your subclasses, and they give you a number of features. And I think I'll just quickly deal with the ability score improvement that you get at 4th, 8th, 12th, 16th and 19th. Important to remember that you don't get quite as many ability score improvements as a fighter, and possibly for a barbarian you're going to be less interested maybe in taking a feat and more focused on, if those are being used at your table, and more interested in bumping up those ability scores, because you could be trying to max out strength, constitution and dexterity to take advantage of the unarmored defense. So some things to think about there. It's not as open and shut, perhaps.
Yeah, I think you've possibly got more abilities that you may want to spend those score improvements on. Also added in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, at third level we have the new Primal Knowledge feature, which gives you proficiency in one skill of your choice from those list of skills that were available to the Barbarian at first level. And you also gain that again at 10th level. So this just gives you a bit more role-playing utility, kind of expansion as a Barbarian, so you don't just have to be the big dumb brute that hits everything with a big sharp stick.
Still doesn't allow you to take proficiency in cutlery though, does it?
Indeed not, no.
Then I think next on we move on to extra attack, which has got to be with the Barbarian's favourite advance, because you get to hit things again.
Yes!
That comes along at fifth level, getting to attack twice. Moving on from there, you get
fast movement, starting also at 5th level, so your speed increases by 10 feet whilst you aren't wearing heavy armour. Obviously all of these abilities play into the fact that the Barbarian is not wearing heavy armor. The Barbarian is either unarmored, using an armored defense, or perhaps wearing light or medium armor. But I wouldn't see why you wouldn't just take advantage of the unarmored defense ability. And yeah, this is very nice. Means you can get to your enemies a bit more. You can also be a bit more mobile around the battlefield. Speaking of mobile, if you were to have taken the mobile feat, either with your ability score improvement or by using the variant character generation rules at first level, then yeah, absolutely. You know, even by this point, even your dwarven barbarian could be moving 45 feet and not taking attacks of opportunity. Very nice for that whirlwind around the battlefield.
Absolutely, and the tactical advantages of moving around the battlefield are aided again at 7th level by the new feature in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, which is Instinctive Pounce, which lets, as part of your bonus action, when you rage, you can move up to half your speed. So that can have a danger that you can get led astray too far ahead of your support network. You're going to be left on your own, isolated, and the cunning DM will take advantage of that with some kind of creature that may be around here. Who knows? If not, though, you can use it very tactically, I think. So these two movement abilities, and if you have the feat mobile, synergize so nicely for the Barbarian, who's popping up everywhere. There is something to look out for on this, though, isn't there? I think I didn't quite understand that it's part of the bonus action. Do you want to explain that? Because
Yeah, so you because it's part of the bonus action, you wouldn't be able to. By this point, you've got 2 attacks, so you wouldn't be able to move up to an enemy, take your first attack with your attack action, and then move and then take your bonus action in between your 2 attacks as part of the attack action. You can break it up with movement. You can't break it up with a bonus action, as far as I'm aware, and that's certainly how I'd rule it at my table.
Yeah, so you enter rage, you do your Instinctive Pounce, then you can attack twice or move, attack, but the movement that comes with the Instinctive Pounce has to be with that bonus action. Bonus action, the movement that you get from that completed, then you do something else. You don't get to just tack it on at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then that brings us back to the 7th level ability that was in the player's handbook, which is Feral Instinct. You're so honed and your instincts are so on the edge and you're so always ready for battle that you always have advantage on initiative rolls, which is a nice feature. And additionally, if you are surprised at the beginning of combat and you're not incapacitated, then as long as you enter your rage before doing anything else, you can negate that surprise and act normally on the first turn. Something jumps out and scares the Barbarian's not happy about that and immediately hits it with its big hitting stick.
This makes me think of the scene in Willow where Mad Mardigan does the troll come out at it and roars at him. He just immediately goes back at it, and it's just like, yeah, that's a Barbarian response. He may not be a Barbarian naturally, but in that moment, it's the same sort of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That brings us on to the 9th level ability, Brutal Critical, and this is just more damage on criticals, which has got to be good for a Barbarian. I think the thing to note about this is that it's a die that you get to add. You get to roll an additional die, or 2 dice at 13th level or 3 dice at 17th level, but that might... So your weapon choice will be relevant here. If you're using a great axe, it's going to be rolling that d12 again. If you're using a great sword, that's only going to be one of the 2d6s that you get to roll. Although that's nothing to sniff at.
Exactly, it's still very nice. Still very nice indeed. And then at 11th level, you will pick up Relentless Rage, and this is the Barbarian archetype of never dropping, never dying. If you want to keep fighting your foes until you're past your very last breath, if you want to take everything down with you to Hell's Gate, then this is that ability. So when if you drop to 0 hit points while you're raging and don't die outright, there are a few things that can cause you to die outright. Certain spells, massive damage, that kind of thing. But if none of those happen, you can make a DC 10 Constitution saving throw, and if you pass that, you drop to 1 hit point instead. and then you can use this, you can carry on using this, but every time you use it, the DC for the saving throw increases by 5, and when you finish a short or a long rest, that DC resets to 10. But I can see by this level, your average Barbarian getting a good couple of uses out of that before finally dropping.
Absolutely. And of course it scales somewhat when you get your capstone ability to be even more difficult to beat. It works really nicely with some of the subclasses, which we'll talk about when we get onto them. What about sort of this is one where the synergy with the half-orc racial feat can potentially be very powerful. Classic sort of barbarian issue to deal with. That moves us on to 15th level Persistent Rage, where it ends early only if you fall unconscious or if you choose to end it. So that stops if you are allowing the self-flagellation exploit, that doesn't need to be continued from this point. However, this doesn't mean that your rage lasts more than a minute.
No, your rage still only lasts a minute. It only ends early. It doesn't only end if you fall unconscious.
I read this and thought, hooray, I get to be angry until I go to bed. I get sent to bed because I'm overtired, particularly if I'm a berserker.
Yes. You have to wait until 20th level when you get unlimited rages, and then you can essentially be raging all the time. So the next ability that you'll get at 18th level is Indomitable Might. And so I guess this takes a little bit of clarification. If your total for a strength check is less than your strength score, you can use that score in place of the total. So if you're rolling, say, an athletics check, you may be that's a strength check. You may be proficient in athletics. By 18th level, your proficiency bonus is a +6. If you've got your strength at 20, which you probably should have by 18th level as a barbarian, that's giving you a +10 to your roll. So anytime you roll a 9 or lower, you could take the 20 instead, because you've already got you get the +10 from all of that. But it doesn't mean you add your strength score to your ability check. It just means if you roll lower than your strength total score, you can use that score in place of the total.
Yeah, so it's not just what you roll on the d20, it's the d20 plus whatever modifier if that's less than. Yeah, I get you. So, okay. And then we come to the capstone. Primal Champion at 20th level. You embody the power of the wilds. I mean, this was already sounding good because it bumps up your strength and constitution by 4 and raises their possible maximum up to 24. That's a synergy with lots of the other abilities earlier, and particularly unarmored defense. I mean, if you've got a 20 in dexterity as well, and you've got a 24 in constitution, you're looking without having your shield. You're looking at a 22 constitution. 22 armor class.
22 AC. Without a shield.
Yeah.
Strap on a +3 shield by 20th level. Nice AC of 25 without even wearing any armor. There are classes out there that can beat that by that level, but for not wearing any armor and for all the synergy you get with that unarmored defense,
the lack of disadvantage on stealth checks, etc. So that's our overview of the basic class abilities, both in the player's handbook and in the Tasha's Cauldron of Everything options. And we'll now have a look at the subclasses. The first subclass we're going to look at is the Berserker. To many, this is the epitome of what it means to be a barbarian, to be so lost in the rage that you get your frenzy on. Many historical examples of berserkers, but probably the one that springs most to mind for me is thinking about the sort of classic Norse gnawing at the shield rim berserker that's maybe wearing bare skin and no other armor, diving in, bloodthirsty, crazy. The kind of abilities that you get, of course, are defined first of all by that frenzy ability that you get at 3rd level when you choose the path of the berserker, and that enables you don't have to take a frenzy when you rage, but when you do rage you can frenzy, and that lets you make a bonus action attack with your melee weapon on each of your turns. But the downside, when your rage ends, you take 1 level of exhaustion. And that, to some extent, really defangs this.
Yeah.
Don't know what you think.
No, the bonus action attack with a single melee weapon is a nice feature, because it's obviously that then you also use your strength modifier, so it's not like using an offhand attack, and it's not even particularly like using the Great Weapon Master feat. You know, it's an extra full-on attack with that weapon rather than
or Pole-Arm Master.
Pole-Arm Master
for the 1d4 even. It's not.
But yeah, when your rage ends, you suffer 1 level of exhaustion, and this for me is it's too high a price. It doesn't necessarily state that those exhaustions stack, but my reading of it would be that you get 1 level of exhaustion for every time you frenzy, and at 3rd level, once you get this ability, you get 3 rages. If you use all of those on a frenzy, then you are 3 levels of exhaustion before you get your next long rest. So you're at disadvantage on ability checks, your speed is halved, and you have disability on attack rolls and saving throws. And then you take a long rest, and you only lose 1 level of exhaustion.
And you don't get to ignore that exhaustion,
Right.
because you're raging or frenzying. I really, really want to like this because I love the idea of getting in an extra hit with my greatsword. And the way that potentially synergizes with some of the other abilities, particularly the higher level abilities of the Barbarian. You're doing more damage, you're getting a greater chance of doing critical hits. Doing more damage on a critical hit. It could be so good. I don't think overpowered, but the exhaustion drops it right down.
It does.
And
I really wanted to like the Berserker. For me, the Berserker is an archetypal form of Barbarian. You know, that some Barbarians use rage as a tool. For Berserkers, rage is a way of life. It's how they always feel, and it's that pure frenzy. And and I think of some examples from history or even from popular culture. I think of Eric the Viking and the Berserkers and the Berserkers and Eric the Viking, which are highly humorous. Sven and his dad, exactly, highly amusing. But it's that's what I think of when I think of a Berserker. I don't think of somebody who's got into a rage and now needs a nap.
I mean, I could, if it were temporary exhaustion, if they specifically said you suffer 1 level of exhaustion until you take a short rest, or something like that. So make it a special mechanic that, there is a downside to this quite powerful ability, but it's not such a downside.
The ability's not powerful enough for this downside to be worth the payoff.
No.
Not without.
And it doesn't scale.
Not without a lot of homebrewing those rules. And I think this just takes away from what a Barbarian is.
Fixing it, I mean, that's the difficulty. Is what do you do? Say it's a level of exhaustion that goes away on a short rest, then you've got to keep track of a separate kind of level of exhaustion. Saying you don't get the exhaustion at all, does that make it OP? Taking from the Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, you've got the what's it called, the Path of the Beast, where they get the claw attack, which is not a bonus action attack, but it's part of an existing attack. That, unfortunately, that's only a D6. So here, this would then probably be overpowered. There has to be a way to fix it, but you'd have to be really careful to homebrew doing so.
You'd have to be really careful with the balance, and we're looking at the way they're written, the way they're presented in the books, and the way it's presented. It's just this is taking away from what a barbarian. A barbarian is supposed to be that never tiring, indomitable warrior force of nature, and this immediately takes away from that.
Yeah, and I think it's a real shame because there's so many. I see so many role-playing and historical inspiration for this kind of character. It could be so much fun, and it probably is so much fun. But this is a difficulty. I'm not sure it's a reason would I as a result never take a Barbarian and play Path of the Berserker. I'm the kind of person who would say, for the role-playing purposes, I'd suffer this. But I would be trying to sweet talk my DM.
Good luck with that.
Pretty please. Yeah, absolutely. Into just softening
Your
the
DM's fairly
downside
stubborn,
of this.
to be fair.
I don't know. I'll bring Jaffa cakes or something. I mean, please, come on.
So
yeah, it's just.
Yeah, it's. I think it just, like I said, I think it just takes away from the core of the class, which is.
Hey, they fixed the Ranger. They could fix this. Why haven't they fixed this?
They have fixed it with other subclasses.
Yeah, true.
So the next ability at 6th level as a part of the Berserker that you can that you will get if you take the subclass is Mindless Rage. Again, fits very thematically with the Beserker. So you can't be charmed or frightened whilst you are raging, and if you are charmed or frightened when you enter your rage, the effect is suspended for the duration of the rage. Yeah, this fits right in. You know.
Yes, great. I mean, particularly fits with the sort of. I mean, historically, Berserkers probably either got very, very drunk or took some kind of shamanic potion made with. I think they're called fly agaric mushrooms or whatever, the toadstools, or they found some other way to get completely out of their sort of normal functioning, and they were possibly a bunch of psychopaths to begin with. This works really well. You know, you're not going to be so easily manipulated. Your rage gives you some kind of clarity, moment of clarity that lets you come out of it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't overcome.
No, and
exhaustion.
I don't think it overcomes the exhaustion, but it is a nice little effect. You know, if the succubus has attempted to charm you, then you can enter your rage and still lop her head off for being so impertinent as to attempt to beguile a berserker.
But you might regret it after you come out of your rage. What have I done? I mean, this plays into some ways the sort of the Hercules myth. Thinking about it would be quite fun, but then again, he didn't get exhausted after he got angry.
He did,
and that was a one-off thing. Intimidating presence at 10th level. You can frighten someone with your menacing presence. If they're one creature within 30 feet of you, if they can see and hear you, must make a wisdom saving throw, or be frightened of you to the end of the next turn. And you use your action, and you can use your action on subsequent turns to extend the duration.
Yeah.
I mean, this costs you an action. It doesn't cost you an attack. It costs you an action. Which maybe if you're frenzied, you're still getting a bonus action attack in.
Yeah.
But
by 10th level,
you really don't like this.
By 10th level, it's costing you 2 attacks because if your action is to attack, you get 2 attacks. I really don't like this. Okay, you don't have to use it, and there may be 1 or 2 niche scenarios in which it works out advantageous. But I really don't think so. I'm not going to give up my action to frighten somebody as a barbarian to make them move away from me. You know, I want my enemies as close as possible. I'll use that action to hit them twice, and then my bonus action to hit their mate, or hit them again if they're not down.
See, I mean, I can see uses of this, but the cost of an action is too much. Yeah. So if this were instead as when you rage or when you frenzy as part of that, then you can intimidate one creature. That could be brilliant. You're charging in against 2 you're fighting 2 trolls or something, and you want to take on one of them and then come and get the other whilst keeping one of them away from the rest of the party. I don't know. Trolls probably wouldn't be frightened of you. Maybe they would. I don't know. Whatever happens, you're going in there and you're scattering one powerful enemy that's a threat to the rest of your party while you kill the other one, or using it on a spellcaster if they don't have a high wisdom. You know, if they're more of a wizard or warlock, sorcerer, could be really useful. But at the cost of an action, it's just.
This is it. This is the problem with the Berserker. The cost for the useful abilities is too high. The cost is too high.
Yeah. A cost you don't see across the other subclasses, really.
Not to the same extent, no.
No,
not at all. Brings us on to the capstone ability at 14th level for the Berserker, which is Retaliation. So when you take damage from a creature that is within 5 feet of you, you can use your reaction to make a melee weapon attack against that creature. It's
too
okay.
Little, too late, huh?
Too little, too late. That's the capstone ability. That's the very highest ability given to this subclass. It's not.
If you were getting it earlier.
Yeah. If I was getting that at 6th level, That would be okay. By this point, at 14th level, you've probably got many other ways to use your reaction. You may have taken the polearm the sentinel feat, be using your reaction to help with that. You know, to use that ability. It's too little, too late. So the two abilities that you get that are okay, but they're not. They don't add anything to the character as a barbarian.
Yeah.
The two abilities that may be useful, powerful, cost too much.
I so want to like the Berserker. I so want to. I mean, as I say, I'm the kind of player who would take all the hits from this and still play a Berserker, because I think it can be really fun to roleplay. But it would depend on the campaign.
And I guess that's a caveat for all of the guides we're going to do for all of these classes and subclasses.
Yeah.
There's no bad pick for role playing. There's no bad pick for if you want to play that character. You know, you're still a barbarian, so you still have plenty. Still have all those really good barbarian combat abilities, and you're not losing any of those necessarily. Well, I don't know. You are, because you're having to use an action for your intimidating presence, and you're losing your ability to keep going with the exhaustion. So actually, this is taking away from. This is bad.
If you use your abilities, you lose out.
This is bad.
You take away from a base barbarian.
This is a bad subclass.
Are there any magical items or weapons that give immunity to exhaustion? I can't think of one. I can't think of one
off the top of my head. I'm sure a nice DM could maybe homebrew one.
Ultimately, straight out of a book, you shouldn't be having to thinking about fixing a subclass, a class, part of the game. There's no role-playing system that I've ever played. Now, but between the two of us, we played lots of different systems, lots of different editions of Dungeons and Dragons. And there's none that are completely perfect without some at-the-table fixes that sometimes need to be brought in. But this is just broken, isn't it?
Yeah, this is just bad, and it's not broken in the overpowered way. This is just bad.
No, I mean it.
I understand that you love the role-playing side. I love the role-playing side, and you would still choose this subclass perhaps for the role-playing.
Perhaps.
I wouldn't. You could take a Path of the Totem Warrior and play it like a Berserker. If you want to role-play a Berserker, role-play a Berserker.
Yeah.
You don't
absolutely.
have to take the penalties.
I would play a zealot and pretend to be a Berserker.
Yeah.
I think. But yes, yeah. So I think that's probably it for.
That's it for
poor old Berserker.
The poor old Berserker, which turns out is bad. And then the next subclass for the Barbarian presented in the player's handbook is the Path of the Totem Warrior, the spiritual Barbarian, the Barbarian that accepts a spirit guide along on the journey with him. This spirit fills them with all sorts of supernatural abilities and all sorts of magical effects to fuel that Barbarian rage. So when you take this at 3rd level, the first thing you're going to get is Spirit Seeker. So this path gives you kinship with beasts and with the natural world. And at 3rd level, when you adopt this path, you gain the ability to cast the Beast Sense and speak with animal spells, but only as rituals, which is nice and full of flavour for this subclass. Being able to cast something as a ritual is fine. You can cast it as many times as you like, as long as you've got the 10 minutes to cast the spell.
Yeah, and let's face it, you probably are going to. There's some situations where you might want to be able to do it instantly, but generally, I think this is almost saying step aside, Ranger and Druid. Ranger. I'm even mentioning Rangers until we get onto the new improved version. But seriously, this is a great flavour, and I nearly said flavour, so I did say it. Oh no. But it's great. It's great fun, and it works. It fits. It's got this idea of sort of like this connection to the natural world, which I think is one of the nicer elements of the trope barbarian.
Yes.
And it's if this is the first thing you see as a totem warrior and you read it, you're underwhelmed perhaps, but then you read on and see totem spirit.
Indeed.
Which at third level, when you adopt this path, you choose that totem spirit and gain its feature, and you have to make your totem object an amulet or something like that. Could be feathers and claws and all these sorts of things, and maybe it changes the way you appear. So if you're a bear, you get furry and thick-skinned, or your eyes change colour or whatever, if you're an eagle, etc. And this is great because you're getting choice. You can be a bear totem, an eagle totem, or wolf totem at this level. Bear lets you have this resistance to everything except psychic damage, which is just, I mean, it's like doubling your hit points, isn't it? It's just so powerful. Eagles letting you so other creatures have disadvantage on opportunity attack rolls against you. So if you are, and you can use dash action as a bonus action on your turn, and so that lets you be this very. If you're a mobile, we've talked earlier about being very mobile and moving from place to place on the battlefield. That stacks up so nicely with the eagle totem at third level. Or the wolf, while you're raging, your friends have advantage on melee attack rolls against any creature within 5 feet of you that's hostile to you. And this is, again, tactically. So, at first reading, you're going to want to be a bear because you're just going to be the single juggernaut of impossible to damage destruction. But the others are also really tactical.
Yes, yeah, they are. They're at first reading, and when we first talked about it, I kind of said, why would you not be anything but a bear? But looking at it, those what role am I playing as a barbarian within my party? Am I the frontline damage dealer, or am I the hit and run kind of tactician, or am I the protector of the pack? Am I Mama Wolf, standing back there with the pack and keeping my pack protected? And this allows you to have those different abilities. And when you choose these totems, because you get more choices at other levels, you don't have to make the same choice each level.
Which is really nice.
Yeah.
It's not committing you to something. I think, so, I mean, the way I look at this, I tend to think of the bear as, if I'm going to be the lone, say I'm in a party where maybe you don't always have to shape your character to what your party is, but this is at third level. So say you've been playing since first level and you're the only real frontline type character, frontline type fighter. Going bear barbarian is you are going to be one of the best, hardest to break, beat, or get round frontline anchor points for your party. You are that. I mean, I don't want to use the term tank, but it is. You are the tank.
Yeah.
Eagle, maybe if you're interacting and you've got, let's say there's 2 other fighters perhaps, or there's 2 other frontline fighters, or you just need, your party needs someone to be able to move about and disrupt the enemy, take out enemy spellcasters.
And maybe that's your party's entire tactic is maneuverability on the battlefield. Maybe you're made up of rogues and rangers and sorcerers, and it's all about that maneuverability, and
this lets you keep up with them.
Lets you keep up with them, absolutely.
Or if you're part of a heavy front line, giving them advantage. Or if you're with an elf, so you can have the elf sniper type character or something with elven accuracy, and you're giving your friend in your party advantage so that they can use that feat. They're going to love you for it. So there's lots here.
There is lots there. So your 6th level ability that you're going to get as a path of the Totem Warrior is Aspect of the Beast. Again, another magical benefit based on the totem animal of your choice. You can choose the same animal you selected at 3rd level, or indeed choose a different one, and that doesn't affect the choice you made for 3rd level. So if you take the aspect of the bear, your carrying capacity, including maximum load and maximum lift, is doubled, and you have advantage on strength checks made to push, pull, lift, or break objects. Very much the bear, smashing things and carrying all the weight. If you take the aspect of the eagle, you gain the eyesight of the eagle. You can see up to 1 mile away with no difficulty, with the same level of detail as if something was no more than 100 feet away. And dim light doesn't impose disadvantage on your wisdom perception checks. And if you were to take the aspect of the wolf, you gain the hunting abilities of the wolf. You can track other creatures while travelling at a fast pace, and you can move stealthily while travelling at a normal pace. These are all, again, very nice, and depending on the role and the party makeup and the kind of how you're playing that barbarian are all very nice features.
I think here the actual aspect of the beast with bear, I think that's underwhelming compared to the other two, depending on your campaign. Because okay, if encumbrance is a big thing, that's great, but okay, if you've got rages left over, you can give yourself advantage on strength checks anyway.
Yeah.
So it's nice, but it's not as nice. And as the higher the level you get, particularly when you get more rages, or indeed a limitless number of rages, obviously that's 20th level, isn't it? But still, you know, the more rages you get, the less useful that is. And again, it depends heavily on how encumbrance is being tracked. But otherwise, it's good. Love the eagle one, love the wolf one. I think they're both really cool.
Yeah, the ability to negate disadvantage in dim light on perception checks is very, very useful. You know, especially if you have dark vision already, so you're already seeing in darkness as if it's dim light, but now you're essentially as perceptive as if you were in full daylight.
Yeah. I mean, for being a wolf and being able to track on the move at full speed and move stealthily while travelling at a normal pace, you can beat. I mean, if you've taken the bear aspect at the first, the totem spirit of the bear at third level, you're tough enough to be out there on your own. You could be the party's scout, taking wolf at 6th level, and you've got that sort of, you know, when you hear the barbarian roaring, you know, to charge in and help them, but they'll be all right. They'll still be alive when you get there. Probably have won the battle before you've even turned up.
Indeed,
bear barbarian. At 10th level, we get onto the Spirit Walker, where you can cast Commune with nature as a ritual. And there's a nice bit of flavour here that the spiritual version of one of the animals you've chosen for a totem spirit or aspect of the beast appears to you to convey the information you seek. And I think that needs to be really role played nicely. That could be so good.
Yeah. And mechanically, as an ability, it's okay. Would I rather that was at 6th level? Possibly. I may rather have that at 6th level. Well, it's a bit underwhelming for a 10th level ability, I think.
Yeah.
But like you say, it's very nice for flavour. It's very nice for role playing and exploration, and makes the barbarian a bit more useful than just combat, as it gives an extra dimension to the barbarian.
Let's face it, Totem Warrior Barbarians are so... I mean, I think if it were anything different, this would be overpowering as a subclass. I think it almost borderline is anyway. You've got to think carefully. I mean, there is a way to deal with Totem Warrior Barbarians who are bear barbarians, but then, you know, as a DM, you're not always going to want to deal with you're not there to be an antagonist, as it were, all the time. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that brings us on to the capstone ability of the path of the Totem Warrior, which is the Totemic Attunement. At 14th level, it's another magical benefit based on a totem animal of your choice. Once again, you can choose an entirely new one, or select select one that you chose previously. Again, your choice here has no bearing on the choices you made at both 3rd and 6th level. So if you're taking the bear totem at 14th level, while you're raging, any creature within 5 feet of you that is hostile to you has disadvantage on attack rolls against targets other than you or another character with this feature. If they're immune to if they can't hear you, or if they're immune to being frightened, then they're immune to this effect, essentially. The Eagle Totem at this level, while raging, you have a flying speed equal to your current walking speed. Beware, however, this only works in short bursts. If you end your turn in the air and nothing else is holding you aloft, then you will fall to the ground. So make sure you've counted your movement properly so that you can land before the end of your turn. And then as the Totem of the Wolf, you can use once again while you're raging, you can use a bonus action on your turn to knock a large or smaller creature prone when you hit it with a melee weapon attack. So that's very much the wolf pounce, you know, the kind of big wolf pouncing up and knocking its opponent to the ground. These are all very nice, right?
They are. I initially looked at the bear option and thought it was better than Ancestral Guardians that's introduced in Xanathar's, but it's not. It's different. It's more avoidable, and of course it arrives at 14th level. It affects generally. This is one where the bear then has to get tactical. But if you are playing, this builds into you are that sole sort of linchpin of the party. There you are as the anchor point for the front line, and everything goes around you. Great. If you are more mobile, then this is again potentially quite useful if you're moving in, causing that disadvantage for the enemy. And let's face it, you've probably taken bear at 3rd level, and so anything that hits you is going to be eagle. Yeah, as you say, you might take some falling damage, but you're a barbarian at 14th level, so it's probably like what couple of percent of your damage. Does that? Are you immune to? Would you have, as a bear at 3rd level, would you have resistance to falling damage?
Falling damage is essentially just bludgeoning damage. So yeah.
So yeah, be careful. But you're a barbarian, so throw caution to the wind. literally. The wolf, I like that. Really like being able to knock things prone because you give advantage to melee attacks.
Yeah.
Basically, you're not going to be the favourer of anyone who's doing sharpshooting, or because ranged attacks are going to have disadvantage on a prone enemy. But it's quite cool. You're costing them some movement to get up.
Saves you taking maybe a feat that might do the same kind of thing. You know, it's the same effect as taking a Shieldmaster feat, or indeed a Battlemaster maneuver of tripping attack. You know,
which is one of my favourites when I play a fighter.
Result. Yeah.
And that's looking at the Totem Warrior in terms of role playing. There's lots of potential here in terms of mechanics.
There's no saving throw on that for the wolf.
No.
When you hit it with a melee weapon attack, you can use your bonus action to knock it prone. It doesn't have a save DC against that.
Normally it's strength on like a trip attack, isn't it? Or
normally it'd be a
shield.
Save DC.
The shield master feat is also
strength save
isn't
DC,
it?
Yeah.
So that's better. Yeah. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of utility for that. I think this is a great subclass, and it's really weird. They put so much effort into this and seem to have just brushed off Berserker.
Yeah.
I could use other words.
Yeah, this the contrast between the two presented in the player's handbook. If that is your only book, if you haven't splashed out on the other books. I think a lot of people have access to a lot of the other classes these days through digital methods or what have you.
Someone at the table. Anyway.
But if you're playing player's handbook only and these are your choices, this is awesome. This is an awesome subclass. Every ability here adds to and builds upon what the base class of the Barbarian is. There's nothing that takes away from it. It's brilliant.
As a power gamer, if you're playing that kind of game, if you're playing in a campaign where combat is everything, this is the single best subclass, I think.
Yeah, I think
whether or not it's the same for role playing, I don't know.
I think maybe once we look at some of the others, particularly part of the Zealot, I think might give it a run for its money. But other than that, this is mechanically far and away the best subclass you can take for the Barbarian.
And that wraps up our review of Player's Handbook, Barbarian subclasses, and indeed the Barbarian generally as a class. We'll be doing another video, as we say, on Xanathar's, and then another on the subclasses from Tasha's.
Indeed.
If you've enjoyed this video, found it useful, please like and subscribe. And if not, and you want to have a discussion with us in the comments, we welcome anything you have to say. We look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, if you really want to support the Berserker and you think there's something we've missed there, and you're a big fan of the Berserker as a subclass, tell us what you think below. And likewise, if you don't particularly like us having so much love for the Totem Warrior, then argue with us below. We're always happy to have a discussion. But this ends part 1 of our video on Barbarians, and we hope to see you next time.